Jason's willing to keep his neighborhood safe when even the Batman won't. Here's a look at the brand new McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Dawn of DC Red Hood. Jason Todd was the second Robin, and easily the most troubled. Angry with a desperate need to prove himself, Jason's impulsive behavior led to his death at the hands of the Joker. Resurrected to become the heroic Red Hood, Jason now walks his own path, learning to handle the anger that forged him. If you have a problem with your faucet, you call the landlord. If you have a problem with a gang outside, you call Jason Todd. Just before, of course, we get a closer look at the DC Multiverse Dawn of DC Red Hood, I'd like to thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that kindly provided the sample we could have a look at. The figure is going to stand, according to my tape measure, at 7 inches in height, or Dawn of DC Red Hood is 18 centimeters tall. We do seem to have a lot of Red Hoods from Todd and his team, but I'm going to just only really bring in a couple so you guys can see the differences of sizes. First, to the left, here's what the figure looks like with the 3 Jokers Red Hood. And here to the right, a little bit more closer in scale, here's what the figure looks like with the Gotham Knights release of him. Running through the former Robin's accessories, first, Jason Todd, I couldn't help but notice, comes included with a display stand that isn't a traditional black stand. I'm sure this happens from time to time, that the factory just changes out the black plastic that they have in their batch, that you may have various shades. So I just have a really dark black stand, and then we have, like, sometimes we have even a lighter stand, and then we have all the various shades in between. This one just happens to be, again, like kind of coming across more like a darker gray, but at least it gives us a better chance to see the DC logo branded down below. Because the mold is exactly the same, the placement of the peg won't change, and it's just off to the far corner that can plug into either one of Robin's boots. I guess he isn't really Robin anymore. The figure does come also include with a trading card. The trading card is very much matching to what we get in the figure, and he is also carrying around a sword and a crowbar, which happens to be the 2 accessories that he has as well. I like the artwork, first of all, and on the back it gives us a pretty decent read-up, although it doesn't really have anything to do with the Dawn of DC Red Hood. It's kind of more just a generic read-up of the backstory of Jason Todd. As a side note, I do hope that we get ourselves a Death in the Family box set. A Joker, for example, speaking of crowbars, and perhaps a bruised and battered Jason Todd. Make that happen, Todd. Move the card off to the side. Speaking of which, though, like I said, the figure does come included with 2 weapons to wield. First, it comes included with a sword. The sword is really soft and plastic. Very bendy. It can fit into either one of his hands. Yes, I already noticed that I've got my hands turned outward. I got to fix that. I will be fixing it shortly, though. The figure does come included with gripping hands. I mean, with the way that he came out of the packaging, he actually already came with closed fists. So if you have any plans at all for him to hold anything, the first thing you're going to want to do, obviously after you take him out of the packaging, is you're going to want to pop these bad boys off, and you want to replace them with these. Something I did want to mention, though, to you, it's very often, a few times this has happened, where we get ourselves an actual peg that's attached onto the ends of the hands. It seems more times than not, we have hands, and then they attach onto pegs, right? This time around, though, we got ourselves pegs on the ends of hands. They're a little larger, and obviously because of that, they're a lot easier to find if you happen to drop one on the floor. Changing out the hands, though, let's just turn and fix these. First of all, I had them turned outward here. So he does have, like, this is how he comes out of the packaging. So he gets himself, like, fists. If you want to do away with that, just pop the hands off. And again, it's just a nice treat to kind of have to deal with only pegs on the ends of the hands, where I don't have to worry every single time where a peg's going to break. This just seems like a so much easier fix. Fixing the problem, though, right away of him holding things, let's just pop the hand in place. We'll do the same thing on this side. Pop that off. And we'll just replace it with this hand here. I also want to mention, too, that neither one of these hands seem to have... Well, I guess this hand kind of gives somewhat of a suggestion that the figure could have come included with a gun, but we know, like guns, it's a big no-no. But like I said, he does come included with... Let's just get him a stand here. There. Okay. Figure comes with a sword. I already mentioned the fact that the blade is pretty soft. As you can see, the hilt is painted in a very dark, kind of crimson red. Actually, kind of a little bit more of an orangish red. And, of course, you can have him holding this. It's just a case of sliding this inside his grip. There we go. There's a second place to store these, by the way. He also comes included with a crowbar, which I feel like this crowbar we have gotten released before with other Red Hoods. So I don't think this is the first time, and I don't imagine this is the last time either. Todd, Death of the Family box set. But this can also fit in his hand as well. Now, as I'm turning this figure slightly to the side, you may already be asking yourself, hey, wait a minute. What's that on the back of his body? That's the place where you can store these weapons. So if you don't want to necessarily put them in his hands, you can find a second place to store them. You take the sword, you take the crowbar, and if you look around to the back of the figure, I find the sword actually sheaths easier because actually these are just very soft plastic, little lips, like tiny little lips. Meow, meow, meow. You just take the sword and slide it in. And then you do the same with the crossbow. Or I keep calling it a crossbow, the crowbar. The thing, unfortunately, about it, though, is while these being very soft and plastic, they don't always do the easiest thing of holding them. I mean, a lot of times I find it's just easier just to kind of pry these open and then just wedge them in place. I don't know if most people tend to store their crowbars on the back of their body like this, but at least there's a place to store it on Jason Todd. So again, if you don't want to have it necessarily in his hand, he has convenient storage on the back of his body. Let's remove this because I know these are only ultimately going to be falling off the figure. As for the face of the figure, one thing I really like about him is that he has himself a hood. I mean, living up to, of course, the name, you can, if you want, and it's not the easiest thing to do, you can peel the hood off completely. Although with this being attached to this, you're going to have a lot of resistance when you're trying to peel this off. This, luckily, at least is softer plastic. And I'm glad at least seeing that they finished off the face. Although, again, like just getting this off. If you pry this off, it looks like somebody from Mortal Kombat. That Noob Sabat? I don't know. But you can take this off really if you wanted to. I mean, there's going to be resistance the whole time. I suppose if you really wanted this off permanently, you probably could maybe soften up the plastic, fold it down to the back of his body, and just sort of hold it there until the plastic cools. But I think even though it is a finished face, as you can see with the mask, obviously the front of his faceplate there as well, I actually like that they took the time to also sculpt the band, so it looks like it isn't just literally glued to his face. The face sculpt looks good. Also like the way they've done the red eyes. This metallic red on the faceplate also looks good too. Nice finished hair. It is a figure for all intents and purposes that if you did want to leave this off, which again you're going to be fighting with the whole time, that at least there's something finished underneath. It's not just simply a peg or just unpainted hair. So they spent some time, really thought this out to if anybody wanted to peek underneath the hood. No, okay. If you wanted to, again, you've got yourself a finished face underneath. Because of course the hood is covering over so much of this, it means that moving the head around is going to cause a little bit more of a harder time on your part. I mean, you can kind of get your finger still in there and move things around, which you'll see when we get down to the articulation on the figure. It's not the easiest thing to do, obviously, just because obviously it's so self-contained. This can also peel back at the bottom. Now, what they likely have done is they've glued it here and they've glued it here, so you can't pry this completely away. If you pry it away like I've done, well, I did this earlier, so don't think I just broke this now for the review, but I wanted just to show you guys that they actually put little slots right here. So you can see there's like little placement of pegs that if you wanted to, don't do necessarily what I did. I mean, like I said, I did this earlier when I was kind of messing around with the figure. I mean, if you wanted to kind of peel this away, I suppose you could and have this a little bit looser. But the moment you kind of just move this too much, you might notice where this is supposed to be glued in place. And then obviously the symbol that he's supposed to have on the front of his chest isn't going to be finished all the way. Ideally, I would have really liked if the jacket was a separate piece. Now, again, you can just do this yourself. You just peel the sides away. And if they had actually finished it underneath, just because I kind of like the idea that this be a looser jacket, even though he has a lot of freedom here, he doesn't have really as much freedom here. The coloring is painted quite well. I mean, like he's got again, that kind of orangish red here for the majority of his hood. You've got some additional black he's got down below as well. You'll notice as well, like the symbol not only is sculpted onto the body, so they haven't just painted it, but it's also more of a matte paint, whereas everything kind of around it kind of is more of a shinier finish. He's got red, though, in his gauntlets. He's also, of course, got blacks in his sleeves. He's a much more rural dressed. Is it rural? Rural dressed Red Hood, as you can see. Obviously, the whole thing about this story is that Red Hood moves into the residence of this neighborhood. And it's like one of those traditional movies where the guy comes in, like even like the Clint Eastwood movies, the Westerns back in the day. The guy with no name moves into a town and helps the people that live there from those mean old sheriffs or whoever's kind of being corrupt in the city. Kind of the same thing for this version of Red Hood as well. The pants is actually one thing, and I don't know, I just keep bringing back in this guy because I brought him in earlier as well. Even though there's very much a lot of things different between the two figures, I don't know why that when looking at this guy, I kind of think a lot of this guy. Although when you're looking at the colors of his outfit, for example, he's a much lighter, kind of more khaki color, whereas this one here would have been more of a darker gray. He does have, though, very similar sort of panel lining here down the side of his leg. And, of course, he's got some additional red on the bottoms of his boots. So even though there is a lot more... he's a little bit more civilian dressed necessarily, but I guess that's one of the things that Red Hood kind of even was. Like, even just to bring back in like the Three Jokers Red Hood, other than really his hood, everything else really suggested the idea that this guy was just like a regular street thug dressed guy that was walking around the streets. This guy just happens to have a whole lot more color going for him. Now, for the figure's articulation, here again is where we're going to have some issues here moving things around just because the hood's going to be getting in the way. If you wanted to, yes, you could peel this back. I mean, you can still get in there and start moving the face around. The face moves front and back. You can also move it up and down, really, too. He has an upper torso ball joint. Again, if you wanted to, and I'm not suggesting, nudging you guys in the direction that if you want to peel the jacket away, but if you did want a little bit more freedom, it is a possible thing. It's going to be unfinished underneath. That's all. I might just end up peeling it off on this side too, because, you know, even though you're going to see that it's unfinished symbol on this side, I like that there's a little bit more freedom here for his jacket. For his upper torso, it's going to be on a ball joint. His lower abdomen area is also on a ball joint. As for his arms, they rotate all the way around. There's nothing at all getting in the way. This guy likes to go sleeveless. So, you know, again, if you rotate his arm, there's nothing at all from the torso that's going to be getting in the way. Nor is anything going to be getting in the way if you want to bring his arms outward at 90 degrees. The figure does have a swivel in his bicep. The figure also does have a double hinge on the elbow. It's one of those elbow joints as well that it seems somewhat seamless. Sometimes when you are bending the elbow, obviously you're going to notice like, hey, the elbow's way back here and then the joint's further forward. But it's one of those unavoidable things just because, again, the nature of the way that this joint works. The hands rotate all the way around. You can also hinge them back and forth as well. The legs split out. Now, there are ratchet joints you can see on the insides of the thighs. So when you are moving the legs, you probably can hear. It's almost like I'm cracking the shell of a lobster. You can bring the legs forward. You can bring the legs back. There is a decent swivel actually at the top of the thigh. There's even better of a swivel about halfway up the thigh. As you can see, there's a cut right there. The figure does have a double hinge on the knee. I couldn't help but notice, though, on mine, it's a little on the loose side. There's no articulation here for the boot. The boot is actually just sculpted to the rest of his calf, but there is an ankle pivot back and forth. There's an ankle rocker this way, and the figure does have toe articulation as well. I don't know if I would say this is my favorite Red Hood. I mean, for me at least, I'm one of those old guys. I grew up with the comics way back in the 80s and 90s. For me, like classic Red Hood with the big giant dome. Love to get my hands on that one. But I mean, to bring back in Red Hood kind of keeps the idea still there that Red Hood in this case kind of, again, more, well, I guess probably the Gotham Knights version isn't probably the best example to use for that. He's a little bit more SWAT dressed. But if you were to compare, like, say, for example, to the original Red Hood that predates this guy, or even the one that we got from Three Jokers, he, again, is more like a civilian dressed, like leather jacket wielding guy that just happens to have a red hood. This guy kind of comes across a little bit more like a Mortal Kombat bad guy, just because, again, he's got the mouth guard there on the front, and he's got kind of the hood over top. He's certainly, of the three that I have in front of you guys, he is the most brightly colored Red Hood. And if anything could be said, at least for this guy, at least there is that the fact that this guy has storage sections on the back of his body. Neither one of these guys could have actually said that. Truth be told, though, neither one of these figures I don't think really had much in the way of accessories, so he might even have that beat for the fact he has himself not only a crowbar, but also a sword. The sword, though, again, is a little on the more softer plastic. This crowbar, while we've already gotten this release before, again, I'd love to get a Death in the Family release, a Joker and Jason Todd pack. Who else would be interested in that? Let me know down below in the comments section. While I will say, it is not one of my favorites of the Jason Todd Red Hoods that we've gotten, the Dawn of DC, though, does things still pretty good, and he's a decent-looking figure. He's certainly one of the brighter ones we've gotten from McFarlane and his team. Maybe a little less to do with Jason Todd, but all the more to do with Red Hood. I have a side quest of mine to track down and get my hands on that classic Red Hood, which is listing online for a pretty decent price. Walmart's, of all places, would be the last place I would really think to look for DC Multiverse figures, has actually a decent priced classic Red Hood right now. I might try to get my hands on that one. When you think of the term, though, Red Hood, you tend to think of a character or a villain that has a pill-shaped bottle helmet, or one that's completely covering his face. In fact, thinking Red Hood, the one figure that actually applies the most to that rule would probably be the one that we're getting here from the Dawn of DC. Granted, though, the hood is all attached to his jacket, so you're hoping for mobility in his head. It's going to be a little harder to do, but I at least commend the team behind the scenes at McFarlane Toys that they at least sculpted a fully finished head. So if you want to peel back the hood, so to speak, you'll see that there's a head that's finished underneath. Now, you can also, speaking of peeling, peel the jacket away. It's not really supposed to be peeled away, but I accidentally discovered that just prior to hitting record. It does give a little bit more mobility around the top of his torso, but it does, though, make the symbol on the front of his chest look very much more unfinished when you lift the jacket up. Storage space is definitely in abundance here for the figure. He's one of the few Red Hoods, if you don't count holsters on the sides of his legs, because half the time they don't come with pistols anyways, but he has at least storage spaces on the back of his body to store not only the sword and the crowbar. He's doing one better, though, at least than the Red Ninja from Mortal Kombat, which I may have called earlier Noob Sabat. I was trying to think of Ermac, the Red Ninja. I wouldn't say necessarily that this is one of my favorite of the Red Hoods, but I do dig his design, and I do like his color scheme. He's a pretty good-looking Red Hood when it's all said and done. If you guys are interested to get this one for yourself, I believe he is available as of right now. I'd like to, of course, thank the folks over at McFarlane Toys that did make this review possible by providing this sample of the brand new Dawn of DC Red Hood that we had the chance to have a look at in this review. Hey now, hey you. Did you enjoy the video? I certainly hope that you did. I don't mean to be bringing all the attention to you, but if you certainly did want to stick around for more, you can hit the subscribe, you can turn on the bell, but the most important thing is that you come back. Even though we are wrapping things up right now for the Red Hood, there will be in fact more DC Multiverse reviews in the pipeline coming your way all this week. As always, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.